Welcome to Your College Bound Kid,
a podcast for parents, college counselors, students, and anyone who wants a weekly deep dive into the world of college admissions.
My name is Dave. I'm a parent of a daughter in college, and we live in Chicago, Illinois.
I'm Lisa, and I'm a clinical psychologist and college counselor. I have a daughter in college, a daughter in high school, and a son in middle school. After 30 years in Chicago, we recently moved to North Carolina.
My name is Mark. I'm a college coach in Atlanta and the parent of two daughters. Karis, a graduate of Davidson College, and she is the founder of the Spanish tutoring company, SpanishHelpToday.com. And Joy is a graduate of the University of Georgia, and she is getting her master's degree at North Carolina State University.
This week in the news, what's the deal with engagement? By Owen Knight of the Tulane University blog. Our question from a listener: if I cannot visit all of the colleges on my students list, how do I know which ones to visit? That is from Anonymous. Our interview is part 2 with Dr. Kelly Holloway, the Director of Admissions at Mercer University, on Understanding Mercer. And our college spotlight is Pitzer College in Claremont, California.
All right, my friend. You're going to take some time and relax from all your real estate and doctoring over there and watch some football?
I'm definitely going to watch some football. Unfortunately, we have about 3 to 6 inches of snow coming in Chicago. So I'm going to actually go down to Atlanta. Mark's going to do some house sitting for me while he shovels some snow. Because, he misses up here.
Well, I was talking about you busting on football for injuries, but admitting you're a hypocrite and you watch it.
Oh, yeah. Well, you know what? It's the modern Roman gladiatorial sport, thumbs down, another one bites the dust. Let's keep on going.
Next man up, as they say. All right, friends. So my admissions tip for today has to do with your activity section. And I'm mostly speaking to juniors or sophomores, freshmen. Got a great email from a 6th grade parent this week. So we have listeners of all ages. And this will be a tip. 12th, you've turned your applications in by now. So I've said this before. The activities list is often misunderstood. And understandably so, because that's a terrible name for it. It really is not the activities list. I'd prefer a name like commitments list or something like that. Because really, colleges want to know how you spend your time. And so 2 things that are often misunderstood or overlooked is the fact that they want to know your personal hobbies as well as family obligations. So I look back at last year, Dave, and students I worked with, I can think of 8 or 10 things right off the top of my head that students did with brainstorming. They came to realize, oh, snap, I'm supposed to include that? So we're referring to things such as one student was really into thrifting, another one was really into crochet, one was training for triathlon, one was really into jogging, one was really into weight training. One was really into watching movies and writing movie reviews. Those are just a half a dozen or so things off the top of my head that students didn't think of including when it comes to hobbies, but it was something they spent a lot of time on and something any admission officer would want them to include. Then we didn't even get into the things like family responsibilities. It's like the kid who has to take care of the younger brother because mom has to work until 8 o'clock. But I've shared that before. My tip is this. This is actually a place where parents can be incredibly helpful in the process, or another person who knows you well. Because it's my experience in working with students that they do not think of all of the things they should include on their own. It's very helpful for them to have a sounding board, someone who knows them really well, to brainstorm with them and say, let's talk about all your hobbies in high school. Let's talk about your family responsibilities. And normally, somebody who knows them well will be able to surface some things they weren't even thinking of including. So you parents, you want to know a good place for you in this process? If your kids will let you, this is a good place. Be the brainstorming partner to help identify those family responsibilities and those hobbies that they don't think of because such a dumb word like activities is used, and it makes them think about things like the band or the volunteer community, club or the basketball team. Make sense, Dave?
Absolutely.
And our admissions vernacular is the word assured admissions. And if there's somebody out there that says, bump this, I don't want to deal with all this stress and anxiety and all these essays and all these subjective ways schools make decisions, there's always schools that have assured admissions. And what that means is an automatic guarantee if you hit certain objective criteria. Dave, it's what I called in my book and in my video series, admissions by the numbers. Sometimes called assured admissions, sometimes called guaranteed admissions. What am I talking about? Well, I'll give you a couple examples. This is actually a pretty common one. Eastern Washington, Central Washington, Middle Tennessee State. What do they all have in common when it comes to admissions? 3.0 and you are in. You have the 3.0, you're in. No 3.0, you're not in. Simple, straightforward. We call it assured admissions. Different schools have different standards. Sometimes there's a test score in there. Sometimes you have to be top 25% of your class. Sometimes it's a different number for in-state and out-of-state. And not everybody has this, by the way, but a sizable number of schools do. Assured admissions, admissions by the number, guaranteed admissions, all the same thing. There's other terms out there we've shared in other admissions vernaculars for that as well. But straightforward process. You're in or you're out, and you can know ahead of time, and you don't have to have all this sweat. Of course, if they don't have the schools on your list that fall in that bucket, then sorry, you're kind of up a creek without a paddle. But still good to know about assured admissions.
And Mike,
yeah, go ahead.
I actually think it's a great exercise for kids to actually look and see if there is an assured admissions institution that might be compatible with them. Because what a wonderful addition to your college list, knowing that no matter what happens, you're in at a college that you can actually enjoy and that would be good for you. And I think a lot of kids would be surprised if they spent the time and did some digging to find schools that they are pretty much guaranteed to get in no matter what. And it's just a great emotional blanket to know that at the end of the day, you will be in college and you will be in a place that you have looked at and pre-approved and you think will be good for you.
Well, Dave, I'm really glad you shared that, because one of the things that shows me how much angst is in this process, how much mythology is out there. Every single year, something like this happens to me. I mean, it happens to me multiple times. In fact, I'm thinking of a kid in Chicago right now with a 1570 SAT, and it happened to her. And so what am I talking about? It's someone who gets in a school and then they breathe a sigh of relief, and it's like, oh, at least I'm going to college. And I'm thinking, of course you were going to college. But it just shows how much angst is out there. In the back of people's mind, there's this little fear of, what if I get shut out? And so, in fact, the student with that 1570 SAT, and she also had really, really high grades as well, she made a comment and she said, I had no idea how much stress it would take off of me just to get into one school. So, the assured admission schools are perfect for that. They address it better than anybody. All right. And our big number is 42,600. And that is how many applications USC had. This is the first year they have offered early action. And people responded in droves. 42,600 apps to admit 2,400, or an admit rate of 6%. Guess what, Dave? You can no longer call it the University of Second Chance
Choice.
or Second Choice or whatever. You used to grow up calling it that.
That's right. University of Second Choice. That's when we were going. We're like, oh, I got into USC. No,
Dave, you're dating yourself, man.
I know.
You're showing your old age when you say that.
Now
those days are over.
Gucci.
Now people disparagingly say, University of Spoiled Children.
We're going to pay $1 million to get some guy to guarantee our daughter has those pictures sent in from the crew team.
Well, you know what? I actually want to say something about that, which is really interesting. It's related to that. So if those of you aren't catching that reference, pictures of the crew team. So USC was one of the teams that was at the heart of the scandal with Rick Singer and his, nonsense about creating a side door path for affluent families who wanted to go to an elite school, and they'd pay, around $250,000, sometimes even more than 7 figures. And he ran a fake scheme that involved having somebody taking SAT for you and paying off coaches on the other end and getting them to pretend that the student was a recruited athlete. And USC and other schools, but that USC was pronounced as anyone because, what was it, Dave? Was it Lori Loughlin? I'm not going to be good with these.
Lori Loughlin and her little influencer daughter. I can't remember her name. So
was that the one that had used USC?
That's right.
I know there's a couple famous celebs involved in that. I get them confused. So the interesting reason why I bring this up is because there's a book that came out called The Price of Admission. It's a fascinating book. And it's subtitled "How the Ruling Class Buys Its Way In to Elite Schools." You can get it. It's absolutely worth reading, by Daniel Golden. I saw Daniel Golden actually interviewed after the whole Rick Singer debacle, and he said, "How do you think the schools feel, knowing that they've been busted like this?" And Daniel Golden said something that really made me think. So just so you know, Daniel Golden's an investigative reporter. So he went under, he really did some research in that book because he came out and he named names. He got admissions officers to literally share stories of how people like, what do you call it, Dave? Is it the guy from Tennessee that went to Princeton, Fitz? Is it Fitz, the senator? Senators are like 25 million.
William Fritz.
Yes.
Fritz of Hospital Association of America. The billionaire founder of the huge hospital chain,
Yeah. So he got stories on the record of like admissions people basically to say like how much they were aided by their privilege, let's put it like that, and what their transcript was like, but money got them in. And so when asked about the scandal, he said, and what college is thinking, he says, "You want to know what? I think they actually like it." I was like, whoa, it was like a PBS interview I saw him on. And he said, all this is going to do is lead to more publicity, elevate their name, and drive more applications. All publicity is good publicity. I think they actually like it. Now, he's doing some conjecture there. There's some editorializing, but it certainly isn't hurting their applicant, this year. I'm excited about our article today, man. Take it away.
And now it's time for Hot Topics in the News.
What is engagement? Engagement, also known as demonstrated interest, is the process of keeping an eye on a student's interactions with the school. Many schools use engagement as part of a holistic review process, since a student who interacts with the school during their application process is generally more likely to come to the school if they are admitted. Engagement used to be known as demonstrated interest, and being in the college environment, we know how you guys love to come up with new terms.
So we can stump people like you, man.
That's right. Can't keep a term for more than a couple of years. We got to refresh it. So now the new refresh of demonstrated interest is engagement. So this is a great blog where they had a gentleman who intimately associated with the admissions at Tulane. And basically, he talked about Tulane, and he said that...
One second, Dave, just so you know, this is Owen Knight.
Yes.
He is the Director of Admissions Engagement, and he is a Tulane alum himself.
Yeah. And what he really stresses in this article is engagement isn't just going up and checking a box or going to a show and tell and writing down your name and leaving. It is an interactive approach where they want the students to attend the events and do research on the university, and through their exposure, use that research to actually write a great response to the essay on why Tulane is a good fit for you. So they want students to be active and participatory in engagement. Well, he talks about what exactly is engagement. And engagement is not just visiting a campus, especially after the pandemic. They stress that you do not have to visit a campus to be engaged. There are virtual events. There are ways that counseling staff travels not to the schools, but to various area events that you can attend. And he wants to stress that anytime the university is taking down your name and address, they are making a note in your file that you attended that event. That way, when they read your application later, they can see that you spent time and invested in Tulane. And then he stresses that the reason why you're doing all this is so that you can use the research and turn it into a great Why Tulane essay. He says, quote, engagement is not a competition to see who has attended the most Tulane events. It is much more of a binary question of whether a student is taking us seriously or not. So the question is, why do universities care about engagement? And he uses the analogy that you've used many times, Mark. Remember when you were in high school and you were going to the prom? Well, if you're going to the prom and you have to ask someone out to the prom, are you going to ask out the homecoming queen or the homecoming king if they don't even know your face? That's going to be awfully bold if you, as just mediocre Joe Blow, asked out the prettiest girl in the room to go to the date with you just based on your initial smile. It's probably not going to happen. You're going to have to invest some time and energy. And most of us, because we want to protect our ego, are going to want to have a reasonable expectation that whoever we ask out to the prom is going to say yes. And this is the same with universities. They want to have a sense that, hey, if we're going to take, the 10%, 15%, 20%, or in the case of University of South Carolina, the 6% of applicants, if we are going to give you an acceptance, we want a reasonable expectation that you are going to not turn us down. But if you happen to come from a school that has good resources and they know that you can attend these events, they expect you to be engaged before they're going to ask you to the prom. And then he talks about the question is yield protection. And yield protection, that's a new term. I had not heard about that. But that's a hypothesis that what schools often do is schools that are in the not quite the first tier or the second tier, like Tulane, often are very leery.
You know what, Dave? I think before you talk about yield protection, and I busted you not listening to the podcast, man, because I've done it as a vernacular before. But first of all, tell people what yield is.
Oh, yield. Okay.
Because if you explain what yield is, then they can understand yield protection better.
Yield is the percentage of students that you send out acceptances to that actually accept you. So, for example, if you send out 100 acceptances and 50% say yes, that's a 50% yield. The top guys like Harvard get like 80%. Other Ivies might get 60, 70%.
Yeah, you're right on those numbers.
Most people to get about the 40 to 30% yield, even lower. So you got to imagine that if you're sending out 100 acceptances and only 25% are possibly going to say yes, you don't want to waste a whole lot of time on sending out the wrong acceptances to the wrong people, because admission officers, their careers live and die on their yield. And Mark can tell you about stories about you mess up the yield a couple years in a row, you are not going to have your job.
Well, yeah. I mean, your definition of yield is better than 99% of admission officers. That was spot on. Think about it this way. If your yield configurations are off to one extreme, you over-enroll, where are you going to put people?
Right.
And we've all heard stories. One of our first podcasts we did was on UC Irvine over-enrolling 700. I did another one, Virginia Tech over-enrolling 1,000. When I interviewed Greg Roberts from UVA, he said we over-enrolled by almost 4%. I got to hire a data scientist to come in and work with me because this stuff is tough. So you over-enroll, you have a problem. Guess what? Under-enrolling probably is worse, because now how are you going to pay people? The budget depends on that. That's when you're fired.
Oh, yeah.
So, yield protection. I'm taking your thunder away, Dave. Did you want to talk about it, or should I keep going?
No. Go ahead, man.
Okay.
We got a lot to talk about. Go ahead.
Yeah. So yield protection is the idea that schools will actually not admit the strongest kids because their track record historically shows, oh, we're going to lose that kid to a bigger brand name. Yeah. The only other thing I would add to what you said about yield is one of the ways schools attempt to build their brand, and this is especially true of private schools, is by having a lower admit rate.
Right.
I find more students use acceptance rate than rankings as the way they gauge schools.
Yeah.
I really do. So, in other words, colleges are aware of the fact that we're going to be judged partially by our admit rate.
Yeah.
I hear it all the time when I'm working with students. Oh, that admit rate, I respect that admit rate. Oh, that admit rate's too high. I'm insulted to go there. So the public's using that. Colleges are very much aware of that. So the concept of yield protection is we have to bring in a class. We have to bring in a well-rounded class in line with our institutional priorities and to please our stakeholders. We can't under-enroll. We can't over-enroll. But we're trying to build our brand, which means we're trying to do that while simultaneously having a lower admit rate every year. So we don't want to waste acceptances on people that aren't coming.
Yeah.
So then the idea being you pass on the strongest kids who your historical research shows you're probably not going to get. All right, go ahead. Sorry, man. Had to interject.
That's absolutely correct. And just to add to that, this is the whole raison d'etre for the explosion of early decisions 1 or 2. A great example of a high-powered institution that has completely manipulated all these parameters to increase its rankings is like the University of Chicago. Mark, I remember when I was in college, University of Chicago had like a 60% admission rate. And it was a highly selective school. People knew what it was. Only a certain type applied. And they were very happy just saying, okay, this is our type. We're going to take 60%. During the next 20 years, that totally changed. They expanded the school. They completely expanded the application base. They went to the common application. And soon enough, their admission rate went down to sub 10, 20%, 15%. They had an overemphasis on SAT scores, so they posted ridiculously high admit numbers to get in. And the way the university then basically adjusted for, hey, how are we going to figure out which 10, 15% are going to get in is they had an overemphasis on early admission 1, then early admission 2. They had special categories like faculty kids that had special protections and so forth. So they manipulated, so they knew exactly who was going to accept and who they were going to reject. And then they expanded that known rejection pool just so that they would look great in the rankings. Cynical, but totally true.
Well, you did pick one example of one of the schools that is considered one of the more some pretty use this term, has some of the sharper elbows out here in admissions that uses some of these practices. Listen, these are very widespread. But yeah, when you think of flagrant violators, definitely Chicago fits that bucket.
Yeah.
Anything else, man, or were you done? I usually normally let you have your big pass-off moment. I just interjected.
I'm sorry. Yeah. Well, the last thing I'll say, and you could talk about it, is it ends with saying that there are 3 big hurdles that you need to get over to get in: academic, personal, and engagement. And it's hard to get into a school with Tulane unless you do all 3. They're equally as important. So basically, kids, know about engagement. Engage in engagement, and if you don't engage in engagement, don't expect to get the date to the big prom.
Thanks, Dave, for that. So, I want to start by saying this. As I move around in various admission circles and talk to various people, especially if I talk to, really everybody. It could be independent educational college counselors, or it could be college counselors that work at independent schools, but basically savvy, knowledgeable people in the admissions field coming from the placement side, not the admission side, but the placement side. Tulane is probably the most despised institution for how they do admissions. Others are on that list as well. And some of the criticism I call them plain, Dave, plain, I'll make my own name up, is that they have fake selectivity and that they've engineered their selectivity so that when they say they have 11%, they're like, you don't have 11%, man. We know you're doing all kinds of gimmicks to get to 11%. Another thing is not only do they take early action applicants and try to twist their arms and get them to flip to ED. I always have to go over this, Dave, because everybody forgets. Early action, early deadline, early notification date, not binding. Have until May 1st. Shop around, visit schools, compare financial aid offers and all that. Early decision, early application deadline, early notification, but it is binding. You as a student sign, your parents sign, your school signs that you withdraw all other applications, and you enroll. So not only do they attempt to use EA as a pool, as a feeding mechanism to flip people to ED, so people routinely get correspondence saying, if you switch to ED, We can make it happen. But they brag about it. That's sort of considered to be stuff you keep on the down low, those that do it.
Right. I always look at that as with ED, it's like with early action, it's like there's no real commitment. You're just shacking up. But with early decision, you got to get married. You got to put a ring on the finger.
There you go. That's a good example. There's other things, like they have long been accused of yield protection. I'll say something about that more in a second. They've been accused of taking such an inordinate percentage of their class from early decision. This year it hit 68%, almost 7 in 10.
Oh, man.
That it makes it all but impossible to get in through other means. And remember, one of the things about early decision is it highly gives preference to people who are financially in a position where they don't need to compare offers. They also admit this year, and we did in the news on this, less than 1% admit it in a regular decision. By the way, Dave, the other school that has less than 1% of regular decision is Chicago. You mentioned them. So people think they're getting all excited about that. And then they, in the past, have used the Snap apps, Fast App, VIP apps, where you get the pre-printed thing sent to you and talks about how great you are. And basically you don't need to do anything, app fees waived. And to bolster their numbers, their application numbers. So there's been a lot of criticism out there about Tulane and their office, and quite honestly, I've been one who has engaged in it. I mean, they totally understand the business side of the school, but they push limits on that, you might say. But this article is another side. This is the other side, and there's a lot of things to commend about this article. And so I'm going to move to really thanking Tulane and Owen Knight for this article. I think it's a tremendous service to the population at large to explain how things really work. And I want to give a specific shout out to Owen Knight. So for a while, Owen Knight was the Atlanta rep. And I attended a session with Owen about 4 years ago at KIPP. And when I say attended a session, like this is information sessions where the rep visits a school and I'm like the adult there making sure all the kids are, ready, listening to engage with him. And he said something at the time, and I told him this afterward. I said, I think you're the most honest admission officer I've ever seen. Now, recently when I visited Caltech, and Ashley Pally came out and talked about how hard this place is and how we break you down. I think, he met his match, and I talked about that 4 weeks ago when I did the Caltech Spotlight. But Owen Knight, just to commend him for his transparency, he said, no one's come here to KIPP in a long time. And I apologize for that. I've looked it up, and I'm embarrassed how long it's been since we've come here and visited you. And he said, you know why we never came before? That's because we didn't care. He did throw the previous boss under the bus. He said the previous director didn't care about kids like you.
Wow.
And he's an alum of the school. But he said, I'm here to tell you Tulane is changing. And my new boss does care. And that's why I'm here today. So I was like, whoa, this guy's transparent. And that transparency comes through in this article because Tulane's not the only one using engagement. A whole bunch of schools are doing it. And by the way, nothing's wrong with using engagement, in my opinion, because he does make a good point when you have 42,000 and you can only admit 1,000, something like that. Trying to figure out who's serious about you and who's not is part of your job. So I don't have a problem with that. But still is considered trade secrets and not something that you're supposed to share in polite company verbally, let alone put it in paper, put it in writing, talking about how the forecasting process of who will come is part of their job. So I give him, once again, he's being the same Owen Knight that blew me away 4 years ago. Now, another thing I commend him in this article for is he does say something that's important. He says, guess what? Using engagement isn't fair or perfect. It can lead to random box checking. And the point Dave brought out, it does lead to, in a sense, a discrimination, he didn't use that word, between the under-resourced kid, whether it be the rural kid, the inner city kid, or quite honestly, anybody that's not getting good counseling or doesn't have a parent listening to podcasts like this and educating themselves through our podcast or others. Anybody not in that position basically doesn't know how the rules of the game work, and it does put them at a big disadvantage. So I give him kudos for admitting that in this article. I thought that was great. Third, I thought he had a fantastic definition of engagement and how it differs from just using demonstrated interest. And this is what he said. Engagement is not a competition to see who has attended the most Tulane events. It is much more of a binary question of if a student is taking us seriously. And he had a great example of this kid who comes up to him at a fair, checks a box, and when I say check a box, there's these little, you have inquiry cards at fairs. I mean, now they're going high tech a lot of times, but in the past, you had inquiry cards, and you still see inquiry cards. Get the piece of paper, name, check the box. Kid gives the card back. Owen says, "You have any questions about Tulane?" He says, "Nope. I'm just trying to score demonstrated interest points. No questions. Just want to check the box and get points." And so he uses that as an excellent example of why he prefers the term engagement. That person did a disservice to their chances by doing that. So if you think demonstrated interest is just box checking or just doing certain actions without any heart in them at all, it's not about that. So I thought he had a great definition of engagement, how it differs from demonstrated interest. Then another thing he did in this article that was great, he gave many tips on how a student can score engagement points. He said, in-person visit, you're going to score engagement points. Virtual visits, he said, when we travel to your area, we do a school visit, like the one that I was overseeing when he came to the school in Atlanta. Fairs, he referenced a fair. He talked about emailing questions to the rep. He talked about writing great why us or why the school, or in their case, why Tulane essays. Those aren't the only ways, but those are some of the better ways that you will score engagement points. And so I thought that was fantastic. Then he said something that's just really true that a lot of people don't want to think about. He said, we have a big three. There's three big buckets that we use to evaluate students. And I'm not seeing someone put this in writing quite like this. And he said, we have the academic hurdle. Can you do the program? You have the personal hurdle. Do you have the personal qualities? And in this case, they're grouping extracurriculars together in that. Are you bringing something to the table of interest to us? And do you have the characteristics and the qualities we're looking for? But the third big one is engagement. And so he elevated it to that level. And the reason why I find this so compelling is because there's so many other schools that do this, but they just don't want to tell you. So he's really being honest with the population as to how things work. And then he gave great advice to students. He said, as an applicant, I want you to be aware who is tracking engagement. That's an excellent tip. Now, I do have one criticism. When talking about yield protection, he said, we don't do that. We don't deny kids because we think they're not going to come. But guess what, Dave?
Yeah.
He didn't say they don't waitlist or defer.
That's right.
And I see it all the time.
Details, man.
I had 2 high flyers this year, kids that are competitive in the most selective schools in the country, that got that, they got that deferral from Tulane, in the early round and got a little surprised. Well, this is what Tulane does. So I do think from my experience that when it comes to yield protection, they may not deny. By the way, I talked about yield protection with John Bockelstad, if you want to go back and listen to that interview. And he said, not that many schools are going to deny a high flyer because maybe they do want to come. But waitlisting or deferral can always do that and make them prove to you that they're really interested. So I thought it was a fantastic article for all those reasons. Now, here's something I want to talk about, Dave. And this is what makes it very hard for the public. How is the public to know who uses these engagement methods of tracking and who doesn't? I literally had a family ask me that the other day. How does my kid get demonstrated interest points? And then I was about to go in and talking about but then they threw out a bunch of public schools. This is tricky. If you were to talk to Rick Clark or Gary Clark, they will both say, we do not look at demonstrated interest at all. That's Georgia Tech and UCLA. Rick Clark will say, you want to know what demonstrated interest is for us? Did you apply? That's it. And the only way that I really see those schools coming into play for those schools is if you're deferred or waitlisted. Do you now it's online, but do you go online and reaffirm your interest so they legitimately know you're someone who we can take seriously on the wait list, or did you just move on and not care? That's about the only time interest comes in, really, for people that are waitlisted or deferred. So how's the public to know? It's a very difficult question. What do you think, Dave? How is the public to know?
Well, I mean, obviously this is where college counseling comes in, because of having the inside track, and pretty much I have an encyclopedic knowledge of this. As a general rule, I would think that the bigger state universities, the bigger the school, the more public, the less demonstrated interest comes into play, because it's more of a numbers game. But I would guess that the smaller private schools that probably fall just outside that top tier and the traditional rankings would be the ones that I would be most concerned of having demonstrated interest, because those are the wannabe schools. We really want to be the next USC. And so they're looking and really care about things like the yield, and they don't have the big time endowments like Harvard, where they can afford to miss out on their yield by 2, 3, 4, 5%.
That's an excellent answer. So what I was going to say was, and there are some things I would say, like I would flat out ask a school, do you track level of engagement? Is that something you track? I would ask them that, because while not everybody will divulge that voluntarily, a lot of people, if you actually ask them, they will. But what you will often find is what Dave said, that bigger public schools tend not to track this stuff. And private schools do. And the ones that track it the most are the ones Dave said, not the most selective, the Princeton, Yale, Stanford, Harvard, MITs. Although don't sleep on them. They have different ways of tracking it as well, just not as much. They are very concerned about this. Okay, they are, because they still want to keep their really low admit rate, and those kids that get in those schools still get in other places. But they'll work off an assumption more so than other schools that, there's a high percentage chance that somebody will come. Dave, I had a conversation with a senior level person at Yale right when the pandemic broke out. Princeton did something which I was very impressed with. They got rid of single choice early action for 1 year. So one thing I hate that Harvard, Yale, Princeton, Stanford, and Caltech now have is single choice early action, meaning we won't make you apply early decision and lock you in, but we won't let you apply early action to anywhere else. So you blow yourself out of all these other pools like the Tulanes and Chicagos, and now you put yourself in a less than 1% chance RD pool, and then these schools hardly admit you anyway because their admit rate's so low. So the fact that they even have single choice early action shows that they're concerned about yield, because they could just have unrestricted early action like the public schools have. So Princeton, for 1 year during the pandemic, I think they wanted to do a little experiment. They got rid of it, 2020-21 class. And I asked Yale if they would do the same thing, because a lot of times Harvard, Yale, Princeton, Stanford, they're always looking at each other. And the answer I said was absolutely no way. We will not do that. Check this out, Dave. This is what I was told. We have a 90% yield with single choice early action. We're not walking away from that. So don't think those schools don't care, because they do.
And to that point, I mean, I want to, with my daughter, you remember, Mark, that at the lab school, they were very particular in making sure that their students only applied to one or maximum two high-powered universities. And then there was a gentleman's agreement that if you got into that university in the early rounds, that you would not continue your applications for the other universities. The idea being that they had a relationship with those schools, saying, if our students apply to your school, that they're going to be the ones that, are going to go to your school. And that's the way they were able to maximize the total number of students going to high-level institutions. In other words, they didn't have one student getting into 10 Ivy Ivy admits, therefore denying 9 other potential students those same admits. So the top schools, even though they may not say they have engagement, they have their own ways of having engagement.
No, they absolutely do. And we have an article coming up in the next few weeks, actually. We're going to do a part 1 and a part 2 with Julia and Vince, and this will come up again in relation to those schools. So I'll save my thunder for there. But the point is, I don't want to spend too much time talking about the most selective schools because you're absolutely right, Dave. It's that group underneath that that looks at this the most. And I'm talking about some really highly selective schools, by the way, like Vanderbilt and schools like that, all the way to semi-selected private. So on the far end of the extremes, you don't see as much emphasis. You know, in other words, there is an inverse relationship between yield and focus on this. The higher your yield, the more you'll work off the assumption people will probably come, and you don't go to the nth degree. You might track some basic things, like did they apply single choice early action or not, or everybody's looking at did you apply early decision? Okay, that is built-in interest right there, right? Early decision or not. But then you have all the way the other extreme on the private side, the ones that admit 90% or more. They're not really looking at that because they're focusing almost like open enrollment schools that serve almost everybody. It is the climbers, which is most private schools, that do it. And so I would like people to work off of the assumption if it's a private school, they're probably doing this because there's degrees, first of all. It's not like everybody's checking every single way. Some do it much more so than others, but you're safer to assume people do it. Now, this is the interesting question, and I've been asking myself this. Why do the publics
Not do it as much.
and the privates do? It's not so much the size of the school, Dave. It has to do more with the mission of the school. If you're a public school, part of your mission is to serve the residents of your state of all income brackets and social classes. Where if the private schools that aren't getting state money, they're trying so hard to build their brand, because as you build your brand, not only do you get more applications so that you can shape your class, but people are willing to pay more because they value the brand. So they'll pay 50, 60, 70, 80,000 because they think you're worth it. So they're so conscious of building that brand so that they can, one, get the kids that they admit, and two, charge more money, that they know part of that is having a lower admit rate. Here's an example I thought of. There's a difference between the YMCA and an exclusive country club. Those are not the same. The YMCA serves the general population. The exclusive country club, somebody's sizing you up to see, are you successful and do we want you in our club? Maybe a bit of a stretch as an example, but public schools tend to function more like the YMCA. We're here to serve everybody.
Yeah.
They are very uncomfortable implementing practices that favor people of privilege. And it is usually parents and kids of means who hire private coaches or go to private schools, or who have educated parents that learn how to work the system.
Now, there is another factor, which is the larger your school is, the more you don't have to nail this down as much, because you're not going to be that concerned about under-enrollment or over-enrollment. If you lose, 50, 100 people over the summer through summer melt, it's not, you have the numbers to work with. The more you're working with smaller numbers, the more you have to kind of nail that yield thing down to fairly precisely. Now, I do not mean to imply that public schools don't look at engagement at all, because increasingly we are seeing some that do.
A great example is the University of Michigan. They absolutely look at demonstrated interest or engagement. Ditto for Clemson and many others as well. Friends, while editing this podcast, I felt I didn't properly convey the nuance that while private schools track more often and in more sophisticated ways, many publics track as well. And over the next 5 years, I expect the public schools to track engagement even more, much more. For one, we live in a world of big data. And secondly, whether it's public or private, they both need to enroll students, and they both need to accurately predict who is matriculating. Look at all the public universities in Virginia offering early decision right now, which is the purest form of putting a thumb on the scale for demonstrated interest or engagement. The takeaway I hope you will glean from this discussion should not be privates track engagement, publics don't, but rather interest at some level matters to everyone. So the safe approach is just to assume it matters for public and private.
But by and large, all this talk about doing this to this level, it's mostly confined to the independent or the private schools, and it's mostly not the extremes of the most selective or the least selective. although more of it happens at the higher selective level than those schools will ever admit to. Does that make sense?
That makes perfect sense.
So what should the takeaway be for our listeners?
Don't take engagement for granted. Yes, you can ask. Yes, you can basically try and narrow it down. But, what I would tell people is, regardless of whether a school really values engagement or not, I think engagement is good for you, the individual, the student. Because bottom line is, it helps you figure out if that's a good fit. What do we always say? College is a match to be made. And you can't make that match unless you're interactive, participatory, unless you have an inquisitive mind to make sure that you know the details of the school and make sure that those details match up for you. So my thing is, regardless of who practices engagement, and some schools really do and some schools don't, it's always good for you to practice engagement, because in the end, you as the student will be better for it.
And I would say as a tip, just think about, go back to that dance example or other examples. It just makes sense. Yeah. Let's pretend you're a boss and you have to make an offer to two people. Are you more likely to offer one that you think will come, or one that you think, they're probably, I can kind of tell they're probably interviewing 10 or 12 other people and we're their backup? It's human nature for you to be interested in the person that's interested in you. And especially if you're in any recruitment role, anything that involves recruitment, whether it's a coach putting offers out to someone on a team, as a football coach trying to recruit, and I can tell this person's probably not going to come. We're probably 8th or 10th on their list. They've shown no, they don't return text emails. They don't want to come here to visits, versus the one that shows up at every ID camp you have, whether it's an employer, whether you're trying to get a date for a prom. It's human nature for you to be interested in people who are interested in you. And in the case of admissions, it does have some pretty widespread ramifications. Not only you not under-enrolling or over-enrolling, but literally people do evaluate, private schools in particular. The public is using that metric of admit rate, and admission offices really know that. So to ignore that is to do so to some extent at your own peril. It would not be savvy. It would not be reading the population right to just completely ignore that. So just be aware of it and ask schools boldly, do you track engagement at all? And if you don't get an answer, because this is one area where people can be quite veiled and they tend not to tell you everything they're thinking sometimes, as they would try to keep the secret sauce sometimes, and you might not always get a straight answer. I find when I look at common data set, by the way, there's an indication on common data set how much demonstrated interest is used. I find many schools are not forthright there. I do not encourage. You can look at where that box is checked. Is it in the most important category or all the way to the, not used at all? But typically move it one level over to interest level. I find schools are not fully transparent there. So that is not, in my opinion, the best way to do it. But just work off of the assumption that they probably are. And just make sure that you conduct yourself for every single school on your list in a way that there's no way the school can conclude that Dave Williams is not interested in us. We're just totally a backup for him, and he's not going to come here. And by the way, there's sophisticated organizations out there that schools use. All the schools, the Dukes and all these schools use this to try to predict who's going to come. So you got to sort of outsmart them a little bit. Otherwise, you will find that's one of the reasons you find very surprising decisions at schools. Well, not the only reason. Schools are looking for people that match their institutional priorities, of course, and people literally don't know what another kid offers, even if they think they do. So they think they know what James Jones offers a school, but they have no idea. But one of the reasons why it's surprising to people is sometimes people are being passed over because of lack of involvement. So hopefully this was helpful, Dave.
Absolutely. Stay engaged.
All right, go shovel some snow, man.
Absolutely.
Go shovel some snow while I go outside in my shorts for a nice walk. Friends, I close with this. For a while in 2020, the Michael Jordan Air 1 shoes were selling for $560 a pair. But if you try that pair of shoes on and they don't fit, sure, some people will say that kid is wearing Air Jordan 1s. But if they don't feel right to you, you'd be better off with a pair of sneaks that cost under $100 that fit your foot right. All the accolades from your buddies isn't worth it if you get bunions or blisters or skin irritation or hammer toe or corns or ingrown toenails or chronic foot pain. Sometimes a $75 pair of sneaks is better than the $560 pair. And the same is true for colleges. Focus on fit, friends. Focus on what's best for you, not impressing your peers.
And now it's time for a question from one of our listeners.
Okay, Lisa, let's dive right in.
All right. Well, today we have a question from an anonymous parent. An anonymous parent would like to know, if I cannot visit all of my child's colleges on their list, how do I know which ones to select?
And it's a great question because very few people are able to visit all of your schools, especially if you're doing a national search or even a regional search. By the time you look at trying not to have your kid miss school, not trying to go when the place is desolate and vacant, and then coordinating it with your work schedule, especially if we're talking about something that's like outside of 3 hours drive, it doesn't even have to be hotel, but it's a longer drive. It's tough. So there's 3 rules that I have, and they all start with P. So it's easy for people to remember.
The 3 Ps of visiting
The 3 Ps, yes. The 3 Ps. So I'll say them, and then we'll go into them. So the first P is priority. The second P is proximate. And the third P is practical. So what does that mean? So your priority schools, the ones for whom you're either very interested in them, high level of interest, or it also could be one that that demonstrated interest is a big factor in how they evaluate and they're looking at engagement. If you can, you want to get to them. Look, in a perfect world, when you take a look at your list, if you were to bucket your list into 3 categories, you'd say, okay, who are my priorities? And it would either be ones you're most interested in or ones for whom, either your counselor who's ever guided you, your research indicates that engagement is factored into the admission decision. So I would call that the priority bucket.
Right. The
proximate just means, is it close? So proximate meaning, is it close to you? So if it's a school, within I'll quote former Haverford admission officer, and I so appreciated him doing this. I remember it like it was yesterday. He was talking to a student, and he said, Haverford College, Haverford, PA, 6 miles just west of Philly. He said, if you live within 150 miles of here and you don't visit, you're not getting in. So you could also partly throw that in the priority bucket because they're using that, right? Like there are a lot of schools that don't expect you to visit if you're far away, but they absolutely expect you to visit if you're around the corner from them.
Yeah, I've heard the same thing about WashU in St. Louis. My brother went to an information session with his child, and they said, listen, if you live in St. Louis or Illinois or anywhere in the St. Louis metropolitan area and you do not come visit, don't bother applying, basically.
I am smiling with a big smile. You know why?
No.
I interviewed at Ronay, their director of admission, 35 years experience, but she's been there since 2016. And that interview, is going to air not too long from now, a few weeks. And we talk about that in depth.
Well, it is a teaser?
It is an absolute teaser.
Shameless plug.
And anyone who's listening will absolutely know when it comes up because we have a really good conversation about that. And I'm not going to say any more. You have to tune in to my interview with Ronay Turner, director of admission at WashU, president of the college board or co-chair of the college board, whatever a big fancy title is, coming up on, don't quote me on this, but I think I'm going to get in trouble here, Lisa. I want to say 301, 303, 305, something like that. Some episodes like that. It's in the low 300s. Coming up. Yep, coming up. So, so the proximate thing is not just because schools can ding you. It's because it's easy to do. Like, why would you not visit the school that's 40 minutes away, or the school that's an hour away, or the school that's 20 minutes away? It's an easy lift. So that's the second thing. And then the third is practical. So what I mean by practical is, okay, you like the city of Chicago, and you have DePaul and Loyola both on your list, and you're taking a trip to Chicago. You're already going there. Why would you not go by and see two schools? Because you're already going to be in the near area. So it's practical for you to do. You're going to see your Uncle Bob, you know? And so that's like my simple rubric that I use: practical, proximate, priority, to break your list down. And the other ones, you really don't have to visit all your schools. You can see if you get in. If money's a factor, you can see if you get in with a good package.
Yeah, I was going to say pennies would be the first.
Pennies.
Yeah.
Who gives you the Benjamins, but it doesn't rhyme, so here does not rhyme, but
pennies,
it's not
how much can you spend on all this anyway?
Taking my list to the nth degree. So what are your thoughts on that, though, Lisa? The simple priority, proximate, practical.
It's beautiful in its simplicity, but I think it really captures what your decision-making process should be. Now, I mean, obviously, if you happen to be on vacation and you're not sure if you want to, you're interested in school X or not, but you're like driving right by and they happen to have a tour, right? Why not go? Sorry, kids. Why not go? Why not? I don't want to go. So, that just for, like, it's never, like, I think, harmful to visit a school. You always learn more, but you really can't visit all the schools in the United States. So you have to make choices. And I think these are great ways to make choices.
I mean, I really think they are, because, like, think about it. When you think about who to visit, when you can't visit them all, what is not captured by that little rubric, right? Like, it kind of captures everything. Like, if it's a priority, then you'd want to get to it. If it's proximate or close, why would you not get to it? And practical. I mean, practical could be a lot of things. It could be the school's offering a fly-in, so it's practical.
Right.
It could be, certainly multiple schools in one location. One reason why I like to see people start this process by the summer of the rising 11th grade year, even after January is good of 10th grade, if the kid is into it, if the kid is motivated, is because of how hard it is to get to schools.
Right. It is really hard to manage, like, the kids' schedule, your work schedule. And then if you're trying to do like a trip to Chicago, how do you like fit in this visit and that visit and this other visit? And how long does it take to get between the two? And what if one of them runs late or you run into traffic? I mean, it's logistically a little tricky.
Yeah. Like, I'm thinking of this family I worked with in Southern California, and they started like spring of 10th, and their schools were in 3 distinct areas, like they had that whole sort of greater New York City area. And then they had like Midwest, like the Indianas and the Butlers and Cincinnati. They had that group. And then they had, this is a ballet student with ballet. So she's looking at really top ballet programs. And so then they also had like the Oklahomas and the SMUs and the TCUs. Those were 3 distinct trips that all involved airfare.
Yeah.
She was able to masterfully do it because of when they started, and to get all of them done before the start of her senior year. But those trips were spaced out like about 6 months at a time.
Right.
But, and also she followed this, like she did the practical thing. Like part of it was, we could do Oklahoma, TCU, and SMU on one trip. Oh, we could do Cincinnati, Butler, IU, and we can hit up the other schools. And then there was, that didn't account for everything. There was still, she also did the proximate thing. She did like the UC Irvine's, which has a good program like that. Okay, well, that's an easy trip for us, and we can do that. So she kind of did it to a T. And, that a lot of times with that too, it's different because, she's literally auditioning.
Yeah, no. But I did not follow your advice with Lily. that's out of ignorance.
I think you came to me too late with Lily.
I know, but
when you came to me, you already had your list. You were like pretty far in the game.
It took some hustle to get around all those places and the Southwest Companion Pass and my Marriott points, but it was, I'm pretty good at travel planning.
You are.
Doing stuff. I had to think about it. It made my head hurt, We tried to rent a car one way to go from Columbia, South Carolina to Elon. And hey, there's no car companies that will rent you a one-way car. There's things you discover.
Or maybe it's changed, but
Charlotte.
I've seen them that do it, and you'll pay like astronomical for the ones that do allow it to.
Yeah. So, but it's just like crazy stuff like that that we learned along the way. But it was, sometimes it was stressful. She didn't want to go. She was tired. Like the trip that we took, like where we left the morning after homecoming, like that. That was probably not the best timing. She probably was up all night the night before. She was grouchy. But, we still talk about the stuff that we did on those trips and laugh about it, even the bad stuff now. So.
Yeah, it's challenging. And something, even for people that say, I'm not going to visit until I see where I'm admitted, you still can apply the same principles, too, of proximate, priority, and practical. Because even with that, it can get difficult. Like I see students who wait and then they get in 8 schools and they still can't visit all of them.
Days are on the same weekends.
They start overlapping.
So many weekends between like March 15th and May 1st, right? It's just a finite number.
Right. So then you still have to say, what are my priorities? Which ones are practical? Oh, we can go to this one. And then this one starts a few days later. Maybe we'll be in hotels for a few days or whatever, but at least we're already here. And of course, this is kind of assuming that someone's looking at more of a regional search, not just like looking at places that are like, within 30 minutes of their house or whatever.
Right.
But a lot of our listeners, that's who they are. They're doing a broader search than just the immediate geographic area. So this even applies to people that are doing that approach, that said, I'm going to wait. And nothing's absolutely, I want to really reiterate this. Nothing is wrong like with people that have to do it that way. And that's how some people have to do it, either because of finances or because they start this process too late. They have to rely on, okay, let me see where I got in. Let me see if the package is affordable, and then let me go to those schools. And so either way, if you can remember the PPP, and if it's and if you're no, it's true though. If you're someone who's waiting to see where you got in before you make your trip, then you got to look at the pennies or the Benjamins, but the P rhymes, so we'll go with pennies. Thank you, Lisa. You think I'm not going to use that?
Oh, well, I have to accomplish something.
I'll give you attribution.
It's fine. I just know it in my heart. So
okay, great. Well, thank you.
All right. Thank you.
And now this week's interview with a special guest.
Friends, hopefully you heard Dr. Kelly Holloway last week and all the information she shared about Mercer. For example, she talked about the Macon location, the Atlanta location, the Henry County location, the Douglas County location, the medical school in Savannah, the new medical school in Columbus, the adult program for adult learners and students that never finish degrees. You really want to go back and hear that. One school, multiple locations. We get a lot more into details about Mercer, this very unique school. Listen and enjoy. Let's talk about some college majors and or special programs that, that you think are exceptionally strong. Because I know every major is strong and every professor is great, but, schools get reputations for certain sort of powerhouse programs or majors that are big draws. And what would be some of the ones that you'd want to share here? Because, you're speaking to a national audience. So, our biggest state is California. It's almost triple our next largest state for listeners. And so, I find the thing that makes people really consider hopping over all kinds of schools, besides all the things you said about culture and values. I mean, that's really, 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 really important. But one of the other things is that there's a strength in a major of interest or a program. So, what do you want to talk about here, Kelly?
Sure. Well, I think, Mark, that probably one of the most prominent areas that students are interested in coming to Mercer for is programs related to the health sciences. That is probably the largest, actually, a stat from our last incoming class. 42% of our incoming class in this in the fall 2022 class had an interest in a health-related program. And so Mercer is well known for preparing students for those types of programs. We have a very, very strong College of Liberal Arts and Sciences program where students are going to be well prepared and have access to labs, have access to undergraduate research, have access to med school faculty, have access to research opportunities through Mercer on Mission or through just undergraduate research at large. And I think that they see that to be tremendously valuable, whether they're continuing into med school or into any other health-related program. We have a strong focus in that area. But we also have a large population of students that are interested in engineering. So students that are coming here, whether it's biomedical or mechanical, civil, computer, electrical, that is also another area. Business is a huge one for us as well. We have exceptional success rates for our students interning and then graduate career opportunities. 95% of our last graduating class within 6 months of graduating have a positive career outcome, meaning they're either employed or in graduate school, which far exceeds national averages. And so students that want to continue into a graduate professional program or students that are seeking employment see that this is a valuable path for them.
No, and I'm always referring you to anybody interested in health sciences. My last 3 students that enrolled at Mercer all were interested in pursuing either physician paths or something very similar to that. But I also know engineering. I can't remember who it was, but I was talking with somebody who's incredibly well known, and they were saying, they cannot believe the individual personal attention the engineering students get and the way the professors care compared to some other places. And there's a kid that might fall through the cracks at another place or might change a major that won't with you because of the high touch environment that you provide.
That's absolutely right. And it shows in some of the outcomes of our students. We have had in the past 5 years, we have had 9 Goldwater scholars, all from our School of Engineering. That's the most prestigious STEM national scholarship fellowship that there is. And to put that in context, that is more than any other engineering school in the nation.
That's impressive.
Not to mention names, but any other engineering program, your most well-known that might be in the Northeast to across the country to, even here within the state of Georgia.
So what do you attribute that to? I mean, that doesn't happen by accident. That's incredibly impressive.
I wholeheartedly attribute it to the fact that our undergraduate students are in the classroom with faculty members in the lab and are recognized. They are seen, their faculty see them and see their curiosity and see their potential, invite them to be a part of their labs, invite them to work on a research project. And so one of our Goldwater scholars in past year was awarded as a sophomore. That is undergraduate research that's happening during their freshman and into their sophomore year. That just doesn't happen at other universities. And it's because our faculty know our students and our students are connected really well to the resources that any major research institution has, which we do.
I've been really happy to see Princeton Review has really sort of been effusive in their description of you for about 20 years. What do you recall some of the recognition you've gotten from them? I just remember reading over and over and over, they kind of really sing your praises.
Yeah, absolutely. We are very consistently ranked as a top value institution, knowing, of course, that our students that are coming in, they're investing in a Mercer education, see that return. They see the outcomes, and they see what their investment is going to do for them in their careers and into graduate school. So that is one of the biggest things that students see and come to us, and that we're nationally recognized for. And then also another one that I have to mention is undergraduate teaching and undergraduate research. I continue to talk about that, but it is so important, and it is so intentional for our students to have that relationship, and our students to be taught by full-time faculty members. We do not have any teaching assistants, graduate assistants. Students on Mercer's campus are taught by faculty members.
Now, I have to ask a tough question. Why is it that so many people haven't heard of Mercer? Like, nationally? Because
Yeah.
to me, you guys should be a household name nationally. But, I frequently counter the majority of people have not heard of you. I was very heartened recently when I was talking to a family I'm working with in Illinois, and they said, I'm going to tell you about a school we definitely want to be on our list. And they started telling me about Mercer because of their experience with the older brother. But that doesn't happen to me that often. So what's your take on that?
Mark, I'm working every day to change that.
Good.
Every day I'm working towards changing that. And Mercer, like it or not, which of course I would say that I don't, is just one of those well-kept secrets that it is a gem. It is that kind of right size of it being that small, intimate environment, but having resources and having the breadth of the 12 colleges and schools, that there is not another university out there. There are a lot of small, intimate environments, or there's a lot of, larger schools that are out there that have a med school or have a law school or have pharmacy or whatever it might be. But we're very unique in what we have here and what we offer. And it's my job every single day to get up and brainstorm ways that we can grow that, and that we can extend that to more people, and more people across the nation, more people across the globe. We want to make sure that Mercer is a known institution, and that we are committed to who we are and our mission and our vision of changing the world.
Talk about sports and athletics. Talk about where Mercer is there.
Yes, we are a Division I athletics. That is really, really important to who we are as well. We resumed our football team, our Division I football team, in 2013, and we play in the Southern Conference. It's a really big part of our campus culture and a part of our campus community as well. We have an incredible tailgate atmosphere with a concert series beforehand, very family friendly, very much a part of the student experience, as well as the Macon and greater Georgia community as well. So we have football, we have basketball, lacrosse, anything that you can pretty much think of. In 2014, we were well known as the NCAA Bracket Busters, beating Duke in the men's tournament in the first round, and our football team consistently plays a top tier football institution as well each year.
Yeah, I can still remember flashes of your crowd going crazy.
Yes.
When you knocked Duke out. I think you were a 15 seed and they were a 2, if I remember correctly.
Probably so.
Yeah.
So. And it was definitely that Cinderella story.
Yeah, and I see you guys play the Alabamas and the Auburns. I mean, you don't shy away from playing the big dogs in football either.
That's right. We absolutely don't. We played Auburn this year.
Yeah.
Let's take a break to learn about Mark's recommended resource for the week.
Friends, the recommended resource for episode 297 is a YouTube video called Behind the Curtain, Looking Ahead to the College Admissions Process, produced in 2022. So this is a Claremont Colleges video. And if you're searching, you could put, the actual title in.
But I really want you guys to understand my favorite consortium and understand it well. And you'll learn about the 5 colleges that comprise the 5 C's. All undergraduate, 6,000 students, no school over 6,000, 2,500 courses, 655 professors, 560 acres of land, 250 clubs, 17 dining halls. And I focus on the 5 undergraduate C's in this series, but there's also 2 graduate schools. You'll learn about the mountains, deserts, beaches, great food, and all 32 miles from LA. But it feels like a quaint, charming college town with great boutiques, and it is safe. You can cross-register at the other schools. 95 to 98% live on campus. Each college has its own value system and its own personality. So if you want a really good video to just give you a great overview of all schools in one video, I recommend this YouTube video. And we will now return to my interview with Dr. Kelly Holloway. You know, another thing that I've been really impressed with Mercer is you have these programs where people can, like accelerated programs, right? Where
Yes.
or either accelerated or sometimes there's some special discounts if they do really well in your undergrad and then they go on to one of your professional programs. Talk about those, because those are really appealing, you know, not only from a standpoint of some cost savings that you have there, but also maybe a strong opportunity to get into a really good professional program.
Yes, I'm glad that you brought that up. And I think that that is one of the strengths of us having both that small undergraduate, very intimate undergraduate experience coupled with having the 12 colleges and schools. So there are very few, very, very few universities of our size that have a school of medicine and law school and pharmacy and so forth. And what that does for our undergraduate students at large is it allows a connection point for research. It allows a connection point for scholarship. It allows a connection point for advising and mentorship and preparation for those graduate applications. So we have special consideration program for our School of Medicine, where high school students are invited to apply and invited to come on campus and interview with med school faculty members. And as long as they, you know, hold up their end and do what is expected of them as an undergraduate student, maintaining a competitive GPA and taking those prereq courses, they're invited to be a part of Mercer School of Medicine. And that is a huge, huge opportunity for students. But that's not just medicine. That's also physician's assistant, physical therapy, and pharmacy, and business, education, and counseling programs. It allows our students as undergraduates to see and make a connection and have greater opportunity for consideration in those graduate programs, very competitive graduate programs. For example, physician's assistant. Physician's assistant program is one of the leading graduate programs that is out there. And it's because that mid-level healthcare provider is so sought after. Mercer offers that program. Mercer has an exceptional physician's assistant program. Our undergraduate students have advisement, have mentorship from those faculty, have guidance from that admissions director, and have that special consideration to be interviewed and be a part of that program. And that's just invaluable to them. We have accelerated programs in law. We have accelerated programs in business. The opportunities for undergraduate students to continue with the breadth and the depth of the programs that we offer is just phenomenal.
Explain how the accelerated program works. I'm not sure all of our listeners will know what that means when you say that.
Yeah, so it can mean a couple of different things. I'm glad that you asked that to clarify. Depending on the graduate or professional program, it could mean that they could accelerate their time. So they may, for example, in our law school, we have an accelerated program with law where they would do 3 years as an undergrad and then 3 years as a graduate student and shave off of a year of time, which is wonderful. We do that in law. We also do that in pharmacy as well. We also have programs like our business school and our education programs where there is a tuition benefit. So as long as they complete all the prerequisite courses, maintain a competitive GPA, then they would waive the GMAT or the GRE, And they would also have a 30% tuition benefit for their graduate program as well. So there are, a lot of different things that, as an undergraduate student at Mercer, that is a huge advantage if you're continuing into a graduate program, since we do offer those here within the university as well.
Let's talk admissions. So
Yeah.
how do you evaluate an applicant?
We are I feel like this word continues to come up, but we are very intentional, very personal. We literally read every single application. We read top to bottom, the whole thing. And we are a test optional school, so it is completely up to the student whether they want to submit a standardized test score. In no way is it going to be an advantage or disadvantage to them. So students are evaluated for both admission and merit scholarship, regardless of whether they submit a test score or not. We're looking at their academic rigor, and we are looking at not only the GPA, but also have they challenged themselves in the courses that they've selected and they've taken. We look at courses that might be relevant to the major. So for example, if you are applying to the School of Engineering, I want to see if you are Calc ready. That's important to the curriculum and what's expected of an engineering student here at Mercer. And then we also look at what are the things that you've done, how have you spent your time, and kind of bonus points, if you will, for students who have not only signed up and done things and showed up as a member to clubs and organizations, but what is the depth of what you've done? So I don't want, it's not just about how many activities, but what have you actually done? And bonus points, we'll say, for those students who have not only done something, but also have done something that has impacted somebody else. That is a star student. That is a student that's going to stand out to Mercer, and a student that is going to be most competitive for not only admission, but also for merit aid, is a student that has done something to change the life of somebody else.
Give us a sense of what the academic profile of the admitted, first year class looks like. I think a lot of our listeners probably don't have a clue.
Yeah.
Sort of what a competitive student looks like.
Yeah, a competitive student at Mercer, average GPA of our incoming class for the fall 2022 was a 3.98. Middle 50th for the SAT was about 1180 to a 1320. ACT was about a 23 to a 29. So, of course, that's the middle 50th. We have students that were admitted above that. We have students that were admitted below that. But that would be, I guess you could say, your average student here at Mercer. From a qualitative perspective, it is a student who has been involved, a student who has been engaged, and a student who is self-aware beyond what is just on their resume for them.
That's good. I'm glad you went to the qualitative stuff as in addition to the quantitative. But I do want to follow up on the quantitative. So 398 unweighted would basically be no room for blemish, right? So I'm assuming there's a weighting component in there.
That you're right. There is. That is the weighted GPA, a 3.98 weighted GPA. And we recalculate all of our GPAs. So we recalculate to get an unweighted, and then we add our own weight to that GPA.
So let's get into the weeds on that. So do you know what the median unweighted is?
I don't offhand. This is what we look at for admission and scholarship is what we add for the weight.
So what's your weighting system? Because as you know, some people weight like full point for AP and IB, and then maybe they count dual enrollment or they don't, and some count advanced or honors classes and some don't. And
some are looking at cumulative GPA, and many others are only looking at math, English, science, social studies, and foreign language courses only. The academic core courses when they recalculate a GPA.
There's like so many different weighting models out there. Is it?
Yeah.
It's not proprietary, is it? Can you share your weighting system?
Yes and no. It is a sliding scale, so it's not a perfect if this, then this. We look at the courses that a school offers and the courses that a student takes. So we do take into consideration if this is a school that only offers, 4 AP courses, but a student took 4, that is going to look more favorable than a student that maybe attended a school where 20 APs were offered and they didn't take any of them. So that is taken into consideration. It's not an easy formulaic that I could say if this then this. Every student is a little different. We do weight more heavily for AP and IB, and then so we still do offer we still do add weight for honors courses as well. If we are looking at a course, or I'm sorry, looking at a student and considering both dual enrollment in AP, we do look more favorably at AP than dual enrollment.
I'm glad you said that. I've been trying to let people know that, and I'm assuming that's because there's such a range of dual enrollment out
You're
there
absolutely
that it's
right.
hard to know what the level of rigor
Yes.
is. Whereas
You're
AP and
absolutely
IB,
right.
they're standardized. You know what you're getting. And yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
Yeah. And my advice to students, if any of your listeners would care to know, is that dual enrollment, there's tremendous value in taking dual enrollment courses to be able to help a student prepare and, to knock out some of those courses that they might need, but also to expect that they would want to take their major related courses at their institution. So I'll continue down the path of using engineering, for example. If you are an engineering student, we want you to take your engineering courses here. A lot of times because those build on one another, and that's a way to know the faculty, to be involved in research, to be engaged in projects, and for those courses to build on one another. It might be a great idea for you to take a dual enrollment history course, for example, but I wouldn't advise a student to take a dual enrollment engineering related course. I would advise them to take that at their college or school.
Makes a lot of sense.
Friends, this concludes the second part of my interview with Dr. Kelly Holloway from Mercer University. Hopefully you'll join us next week for the final part.
And now it's time for our College Spotlight of the Week.
Lynda, I'm enjoying this California series with you.
Me too. I wish I would have been there with you so I could have enjoyed it in person.
Trust me, you would have loved it.
I know.
You don't turn it down. You don't turn this one down when you get the opportunity. And today we're talking Pitzer College. And Pitzer College is the baby of the Claremont Colleges, founded in 1963, where last week we had the middle child, Claremont. But, our regular listeners will notice there's a change. I'm not doing these 47, 49-minute college spotlights. That's literally how long the Minnesota and the Northeastern ones were, where I do all these stats and everything. But I'm not going in as much depth, but I'm trying to just focus on how the schools are distinctively different, not just from each other, but in the whole national landscape. So you're not getting as much in some areas, but hopefully people are coming away with a sense of the school. So one thing, I'll tell you 2 stories, and I think they'll somewhat give an insight into Pitzer. This is my 4th time on this campus in the last 11 years. So last time I was there before this, I think was 17 or 18. And I was just doing my thing where I go on campus and start talking to a bunch of students and getting their pulse and seeing what's going on. And I was talking to a Pitzer student, and they shared that this place is interesting and unique because we had only been on campus a few days during orientation, and the president said to us that don't worry if you're out protesting a cause and you get arrested, we'll come bail you out, And I was like, wow. So listen, it gets worse. I'm telling this story, or better, depending how you look at it. So I'm telling this story to Yvonne Behrman, who's going to come on the podcast at some point. She's agreed to come on. She's the VP of enrollment. And I told her this over a meal at Decemberfest. And she said, well, that's better than what the president used to say in front of everybody when we'd bring people in, you bring them to college and we bring them to jail.
I don't know about that.
Yeah, that's what she said. They got to him after a while. They've toned down some of the extremism in recent years. I don't think they would actually say that today. I really don't. But listen, this is a pretty special place. And of all the 9 schools, Pitzer is definitely the one that's increased its selectivity the most since I left Pennsylvania in 14 years. Demand is sky high. And I can't think of a school where students are more serious about changing the world, more serious about activism. And you don't go to Pitzer unless you want to change the world through activism, or you're not going to like the students you're going to be around. And this isn't window dressing. This place is serious about transformation of society. You know, it goes back to Russell Pitzer, who was a philanthropist who lived to be 100. And he founded the school in 1963. And it was founded as a residential liberal arts campus for women. So it was founded as a women's college. A lot of people don't know that. And there was a particular curricular emphasis on social and behavioral sciences. And they're actually the first new independent women's college since Bennington opened in 1932. So, women's colleges, of course, were, really popular in the 1800s and in the early part of the 1900s. But then after a while, you were not very many new women's colleges. And it wasn't long before they went co-ed. They went co-ed 7 years after, their launch. But they began with 153 students and with this innovative liberal arts curriculum that exists to this day. And so there are certain things about Pitzer that you have to understand. They were born right at the heart of the civil rights movement. That's not only when they were birthed, but it's also why they were birthed. So understanding that really shapes everything that who they are. And I can't emphasize enough when you're trying to understand a college, you have to look at the history and you have to look at the mission statement and you have to look at the core values as well. So that's what I want to talk about a little bit about today, because when you look at this mission statement and you look at the core values, that's Pitzer. That's it. You get it. So I'm going to read this to you and see what jumps out to you, Lynda. So I'm going to read it slowly. Pitzer College produces engaged, socially responsible citizens of the world through an academically rigorous, interdisciplinary liberal arts education, emphasizing social justice, intercultural understanding, and environmental sensitivity. The meaningful participation of students, faculty, and staff in college governance and academic program design is a Pitzer core value. Any thoughts?
Well, when you get into their mission statement and their core values, and they call it out right there: social justice, the intercultural understanding, and the environmental sensitivity. And you see how that permeates their culture there, their research opportunities, the curriculum, everything about that. They're very open about who they are and what they're looking for in a student body.
Yeah, and I talk about history and I talk about mission statement. You mentioned it. The other thing is core values. Pitzer eats, sleeps, drinks, breathes their core values. Other schools do it too. I'm not saying they're the only one. USF does a fantastic job of living their core values. Another California school, but it's just who they are. So Pitzer has 5 core values. I want to take a little time on these because I feel like you don't understand Pitzer without understanding these 5 core values. So the first is social responsibility. And what does that mean? It means Pitzer students spend 4 years there examining the ethical implications of individual responsibility to make the world better. And what are the implications of this knowledge that they have? They learn to evaluate the impact of individual and all of collective actions in social and political policy. So, case in point, they have a very unique prison program at Pitzer. It's called an inside-out classroom. And students rave about it as one of the most transformational parts of being at Pitzer. So they go right into the prisons and they learn in the prisons. They've set up these collaboratives. They've also set up pathways for prisoners to come back to Pitzer. They had 8 recent graduates. They have 8 more going through as well. They've had Fulbright scholars that have come out of the prisons. And the students come away saying that, wow, I can't believe how smart they were. And why did I not realize how smart they were? Why did I have that stereotype? Students also really come in contact with social class in a way that they couldn't really do through the classroom. A lot of Pitzer students are wealthy, and they're not always experiencing that in the prisons. So this is an incredibly popular program that they have. They've got Mellon Foundation, major money for it. They have colleges all across the country asking if they can come in and show them how they're doing this because it's transformational. That's just one example. Second core value, intercultural understanding. This is really important. So what are they talking about here? Well, they're talking about learning through a lens, a real global perspective, where you learn through the lens of all these other different cultures. So what does that mean? It means that they're big on study abroad. It means they're big on learning to hear how different people from different backgrounds see the world, process the world, see issues, think differently, which really makes them very good critical thinkers because of their exposure to different cultural lenses. And they're serious about it. Third thing, interdisciplinary learning. This is a hallmark of most liberal arts and science schools, right? What I mean by interdisciplinary learning is how you train the brain. But at Pitzer, it's even more pronounced. I'm going to say something about this in a second. One of the things that we did, Lynda, was we met for students for an hour, and the admission officers left, and we got to ask them anything, and they went into things like what they don't like about Pitzer, which I'll share, what they thought was amazing about Pitzer, which I'll share. But you'll see this interdisciplinary learning and how it shapes a Pitzer education, even more so than the other Claremonts. This is probably the closest thing to an open curriculum that you see on the West Coast. I wouldn't call it a complete open curriculum, but there's tremendous flexibility in the curriculum to learn from the sociologists, the writers, the historians, and how the philosophers, the chemists, and how it all comes together to shape knowledge. Fourth, student engagement. So once again, their unique curriculum flexibility leads to a direct connection to career paths in that they let students create their own majors and design their own curriculum. And that produces a very high level of engagement. So they're real serious about that. Another thing, student engagement. This is a really big deal. Since inception, Pitzer students have been on every major part of the college governance. I mean, everything from the academic policies to faculty hiring to academic grading. To curriculum design. Students are on all those committees. So that's the level of engagement that they have. And then a huge one for them is environmental sustainability. So one of the things you notice when you're on Pitzer is cactuses are everywhere, or cacti. It's very different, but they're really serious about the environment. And people who are serious about the environment, this is a place to go. So you'll see, their campus landscape activities, they're involved in drought-resistant movements and native plants and LEED certified sustainable building. I mean, it's all there. And then the environmental activism. So that is their core values. And then quickly, I just want to touch on some of their community values and then see what your thoughts are on their core values or their community values. So they have, just like they have 5 core values, they also have 5 community values. And the first one is community. We live and work together in a shared environment. It means that we respect each other, dignity, honor, how we interact with each other, diversity. That's one of their community values. Celebrate differences, dialogue, the thoughtful exchange of ideas. This is a discussion-based place where from the classroom to forums, you're always in dialogue. You're trained to listen. You're trained to give feedback. Inquiry, that's our 4th one. Learning to reflect, intellectual curiosity. All of that comes together in form of freedom of expression. And then the last is action, taking action. here's a quote I'll read. "These values are mere words until we practice them. We expect to see them evidenced. We expect to hear them named. We expect to debate their integrity and demand change on their behalf. And we're committed to the hard work and dedication that this will demand." Any thoughts, Lynda?
A couple of things. So, there are a lot of schools out there that talk about that they're great for social justice. But one of the things I like about Pitzer is that all students actually take a sequence of courses on social justice. So it's not just that it's available to you. You actually have to do that if you're a student on campus. So that's kind of what I mean, where it feels like it just permeates through everything. Something else about their study abroad opportunities. It sounds like they have a number of programs that are actually run by Pitzer. And I like that when I find a school that runs their own study abroad programs, because you're getting that culture, your school's culture, it goes with you. So you're learning the values of your school in a new environment versus, another school's program. So I really like that about Pitzer. It feels like they're not just talking the talk, they're walking the walk on all of these issues.
Oh, they're serious as a heart attack. And you're right. They have a sequence of courses that you take. They're very proud of that. The interim head spoke to us about that and said they're one of a couple schools in the country that have built that into their curriculum. They also have intercultural understanding courses built into their curriculum as part of a sequencing that they have. So, yeah, so that's the essence of what makes them unique and what makes them distinct. And so let's talk about a couple other things. 40 fields of study, obviously bachelor's only, all of these five Claremonts, all undergraduate schools, around 1,000 students. And some of their strongest programs would be psychology, sociology, political studies, media studies, environmental studies, art, but really anything related to the social or behavioral sciences, include economics, and more recently, just the sciences in general. But it's a very versatile place. I'm going to say something about business in a second that may surprise you. Surprised me, but I'll get to that in a second. So I want to come back to the conversation we had with the students. So I liked how they set our whole visit up. Obviously, we had an hour tour. We had a meal there with faculty. We heard the headmaster, interim head speak. Then we had this hour with students. And then we also had what they called speed dating, but it was rotating faculty members and career service people that met with us for 20 minutes each. So it was a very creative visit. But when we met with the students, a series of students were asked how Pitzer was different than the other Claremonts. And here are some of the answers. It's the most interdisciplinary of all the schools. It gives the most curriculum flexibility. Everything is taught through an interdisciplinary lens. I love it. Many courses are co-taught by two different professors from two completely different departments that you would never think would match. And this student loved the flexibility within her physics major that she had to design her own thing, her own program. Another person said, there's more focus on allowing you to develop your own customized version of success here, as opposed to one definition of success. Another person said, people root for you here, as long as you're doing what makes you happy. Another person said, the expectation that you take your passions and you use it to change the world in a tangible way. Another person said, how collaborative it is. We look out for each other. Never, ever one time have I ever shared a grade with anyone. We are very rigorous here academically, but it takes away the stress not having to talk about grades. Another person, very easy to make friends because people who come here, we all have shared values. Another person, well, several people actually said this to in particular. I'm a better person than I was before I came to this place. This place has shaped me. Another person, mentorship from the faculty is very strong here, especially in the sciences, which is my field. One professor will connect you with another one and allow you to do research with some in an area of your interest. I asked, what are the hot topics on campus? What are students out protesting about? Several people said that we don't pay our dining staff enough or our landscapers, our essential workers enough, and they can't even afford to live in Claremont. And the administration is trying to stop them from forming a union, and we can't let them get away with it. Pomona has joined in with us. Now, this is fascinating, Lynda. I was in preparation for this. I found out that 3 days ago, they basically settled on a whole new contract. So that protest had gone on for 18 months.
Wow.
And they got the salary, the minimum wage basically went from 18 to close to 25. So they were kind of celebrating that victory. But you just see the activism, like they'll take on their own administration if they have to.
Good for them.
Yeah. And so before I transition to who I recommend for Pitzer, I want to share a few other basic things. So they play in the SIAC, which is Southern California Intercollegiate League. It's Division III. And it's very unique because Pomona and Pitzer form one athletic team. Other schools in that league include Caltech, Cal Lutheran, Chapman, and then CMC, Mudd, and Scripps all form one team. Laverne, Occidental, and Redlands. So that's really the league. Oh, and Whittier, sorry. So that's the league. The Career Center is very strong. So they really take advantage of the fact that there's almost 6,000 students when you combine all 5 of these schools together. And they use that leverage in terms of who they get to campus, the internships. They made a point, you can't limit the value of what you get here to salary, but salary matters when we're charging $80K a year. Very high numbers when it comes to fellowships, very high numbers. Now, this shocked me, and this is when I really saw how much this school had changed. I mean, Karis looked at it. I've been back twice since we looked at it. That was back in 2012. I was there in 14 and then 17 and then now again in 2022. So we met with their director of career services. I was shocked. Their number one job, business and finance, 29% of people. So I said, that's not what I would have expected from here. And then the response I got was, well, that's very broadly defined. It's not mostly consulting and investment banking. But this place has changed a lot. If you would have been here a few decades ago, there were more people that went into social work and education and AmeriCorps. And now there are a lot more people. They're very as passionate as ever, but there's still a high percentage of them are still going, high meaning 29%, going into business and finance jobs. Now, Fulbright scholarships, they've had 240 Fulbright winners. So for those of you not familiar with Fulbright, Fulbright is the flagship international academic program that was developed after World War II, designed to foster understanding between countries. And so this focus they have on that intercultural lens, coupled with their study abroad and the research, it just sets up students to win Fulbrights. Like 240 is a lot of Fulbrights. And then I want to say a few things about their admissions process. So their unapologetic demonstrated interest matters. And so Dave and I spoke about demonstrated interest at depth and are in the news talking about Tulane and how they use engagement. All those things that we talked about for Tulane would really be applicable here. So, for example, they have an interview and they strongly encourage students to do it. They do let you know it will not be good as far as, for demonstrated interest if you choose not to participate that. Their writing piece is very, very important because they're looking for people that are really aligned with their core values and with their mission. And so that, and look at their essays. One of them says, be your own weird. You have to write on be your own weird and what that means. This is a place that's been test optional for a while and not just a pandemic thing. They feel very strongly about that. I've been sending test optional kids to this school for a really long time, and they've done really well. They are need aware, but they meet full need. Now that can confuse people because people oftentimes get those two confused with each other. Ability to pay can factor in and often does into who is admitted and who's not. And so just something I like people to be aware of. Any thoughts so far, Lynda, before I get into who I want to recommend, who I recommend to this school?
Well, it sounds great. And, I like that each of these Claremont schools have their own personality and sounds like they definitely fill that modern day hippie kind of niche.
Yeah, but it's more grounded more than ever in I still want to go out and get a real job when I'm done. I'm not going to be unemployed or underemployed. That's the biggest change I've seen over, from when I first started doing this. Not to say they were unemployed, but they're not, they still can go in and work in a corporate setting if that's what they choose to do. Like I've been in an environment, I'll share this story. I was visiting Guilford College, which is in Greensboro, North Carolina. It's a Quaker school. And I was there for an admissions trip, and there was a reception that evening. So I had a suit on. So the student comes up and they confront me. Why are you wearing a suit? and I told them they said, you represent the establishment. So yeah, you don't forget a conversation like that.
You were the man.
Yes, and not in a good way. Anyway, who I recommend for Pitzer? Someone who wants to change the world and they're willing to speak up for what they believe. Someone who likes being taught in an interdisciplinary way. Someone who wants to get actively involved in the on-campus life and the life of the school. Someone who feels very passionate at least about one of their core values. Someone who wants to be in a small, tight-knit community, but one that may be smaller than their own high school. Someone who doesn't want a core curriculum, but values the way students get to craft and design their own curriculum, or that the requirements for each major are very, very flexible. Someone with a very strong sense of self. Someone who leans left politically and wants to be in a liberal community. This can be a tough place for a conservative to find people who would be like them. And I have a couple examples of this. One of our counselors actually spoke up and asked this question. Are there conservative voices in the class? And this is one meeting that we had with the professor, who was fantastic, by the way. And she said, well, I think there may be more than anybody cares to admit, but people tend not to speak up with conservative voices, probably feeling that those views might not be respected. So those views kind of go underground. And if you do hear a conservative voice, someone usually say, that must be a CMC student. That's what. So somebody that wants to be in a liberal community, that would definitely be true. Someone who's either quirky or comfortable with quirky. Someone who's into, of course, environmental sustainability, social justice. Someone who wants relationships with their professors, real relationships where professors are mentors. Someone who's kind of okay with some political correctness, because Pitzer is both outspoken and individualistic, but it also has a distinct personality. And one of the students that we met with said, some people don't like it here because they don't jive with the Pitzer personality. And I know what they meant. Well, two parents I worked with twice. I was talking to their dad about one particular school and how their daughter liked it. And he said, that place is too social justice-y for me. And that would be the way some people would feel here. Mm-hmm. And so that's just something you just have to know. Like, if you don't jive with that, then this isn't your place. But if you do, heaven on earth. Someone who wants to be around people who are real and who are authentic, because there's a real emphasis on that. Someone who wants to be in a collaborative and a non-competitive environment. Someone who values study abroad, who values intercultural understanding, who values perspectives of other people around the world. Here's another one. Someone who's outdoorsy. So I have a student at Pitzer right now, and she was really hardcore and outdoorsy, Lynda. And so we looked at the most outdoorsy schools, the Middleburys and the Colorado Colleges and a lot of schools in the Pacific Northwest. And she found her people here. They've got the biking and the camping and the backpacking, and they do the whole WOA orientation adventure 5-day trip with 15 people. So it's got a very outdoorsy component to it as well.
Yeah, you got the mountains right there. It's beautiful.
Oh yeah, and just the culture. Critical thinkers, definitely. someone who's got an entrepreneurial bent, not necessarily business, although I imagine they could do phenomenally well in business, but social entrepreneurs, people that like to start their own clubs. They love people like that. Someone that craves discussion-based courses. Someone who's comfortable around wealth. I definitely would say that. Students who are not interested in frats or sororities because they don't have them and they have no interest in having them. By the way, none of the Claremonts have frats or sororities, so that's going to apply to all of them. But there's a real kind of anti-frat, anti-sorority mentality here. Students willing to stand up and fight for what they believe in. And then a few other things. Adventuresome people, trailblazers, students who are creative, students who are fearless, students who are comfortable in their own skin, students who thrive off of discomfort, students who are driven, and students who define success in very individualistic ways. So that's Pitzer for you, and that's the kid I'd recommend. It's a very special place because it's one of these schools that knows who it is. I think of it almost when you think about Berkeley in the 60s. It's like a little Berkeley, but it's different because Berkeley still has that city vibe. Like Claremont is still so suburban and with the San Gabriel Mountains and everything. But it's got that, change the world, and it starts with me. So
modern day hippie. That's what I'm going with. I like it. No, I think it's a great school. I like that they are unapologetic about who they are. They know who they are. And I think it's a terrific school for the right kid.
Yeah. And one thing that I really found endearing about it is from a selectivity standpoint, even that it's become very selective, it's not as selective as a Pomona or a Claremont, CMC, or MUD. But these students did not have a mindset of like, I really wanted to go to Pomona. I didn't get in. I'll settle for Pitzer. Like they're there because they want to be there. In fact, our tour guide turned down Pomona to go to Pitzer, and several others did. So good stuff. Well, next week, Pomona.
Looking forward to it.
All right. See you then.
See you, Mark.
On Monday's episode, Mark will share some higher ed updates, and then Mark and Lynda will interview Mitch Warren, Assistant Vice Provost and Director of Admissions at Purdue University in West Lafayette, Indiana.
And Dave said West Lafayette right, man. In the pre-meeting, he couldn't get it right, even that he's from Chicago, which is not that far from the Indiana. He's struggling over there.
I was born in Montreal, Canada, and I remember coming
No
to
excuses.
Chicago, and I was working at a hospital up north of Chicago, and I was like, where is Des Plaines? Des Plaines. And they're like, Des Plaines? You mean Des Plaines? So when I saw this, I was reminded, it's not West Lafayette, it's Lafayette.
There's a reason why I'm busting your chops over here, but there's a reason why I refer to App State as App State is because I never can say Appalachian right. I always butcher it, so.
That's right.
I'm a hypocrite, man. All right, see you soon, my friend.
Take care. Have a good week.
And that's our show. A big thank you to you, our listeners, for tuning in this week. If you find this podcast helpful, please follow us, and you'll get every single episode as soon as it is released. If you're interested, there are a few ways you can really support our podcast. You can click the share button and send it to your friends and acquaintances. You can help us pay our staff and our expenses by donating on our website. You can write a review for us on Apple or Spotify. I'm the producer of the podcast, but we have a fantastic team of 15. Shout out to our co-host, Dr. Lisa Ruff, Dr. David Williams, Lynda Doepker, Susan Tree, Vince Garcia, and Julia Esquivel. And to our substitute co-host, Sylvia Borgo. Our sensational sound engineer is Nemanja Motvich. Our amazing music is from Victor Allen Weeks. Marketing designs are from Kimberly Blass. Lily Parikh manages our Instagram. Our image editor is Talha Khan. Joyce Ducker does our website episode updates. And our webmaster is Stylianos Dimitriou. If you want to have a coaching session with Lisa or me, just text me at 404-664-4340. If you have a question you want us to answer, Or if you have a recommended resource or article you think we should discuss, just send it to questions@yourcollegeboundkid.com. Our favorite method is for you to record your own voice at speakpipe.com/YCBK. By the way, check out our website, where you'll find lots of content that is not on any podcast app. Our website is yourcollegeboundkid.com. If you want to learn about other hot admissions topics, follow us on Twitter at YCBK Podcast. We think of you as our listening family, and we look forward to meeting again with you every single Monday and Thursday.